women are selecting, swiping the same 10% of men. So 90% of men are not getting matches. They're not getting dates. They're not getting laid. That's a terrible thing for a man, his masculinity, for his goal. I mean, like, a man's sex drive is his get up and go in the morning. It's really important. And so men are involuntary celibate and they're angry about it. And of course they're angry about it because they feel like we don't have a seat at the table. At least you're getting a seat at the table.
Hello and welcome to the Go Encourage podcast, where I talk to real people about real life, trying to gain some insights from their experiences building courage. Before we get started, I just want to encourage you to hit that subscribe button on YouTube. It really helps the channel grow and it helps me to bring more guests onto the podcast. You can also do the same on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and Amazon with a like and a follow. And if you're looking for links to social media channels, you can find them at www.goencourage.com. You can also grab a copy of the Courage Journal, which is a 31-day prompted journal designed to help you build courage in your life. All right, with all that said, let's bring on my next guest and let's see where the conversation goes. Hello, Rebecca. Welcome back. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. You're the first guest to have come on here twice, so congratulations.
Well, I feel very privileged. Thank you for having me twice.
Thanks for coming back. So if you're listening at home and you haven't heard our first episode together, check it out. I'll pop a link in the description below. And if you're watching on YouTube, I don't know which way is left and right, which stage left, stage right, but a little YouTube card will pop up on the right hand side. So you can click on that and save that for later, or you can pause and go watch it now and then come back. So not to break Go Encourage traditions, shall we do a quick reminder of what your name means, Rebecca? Do you remember?
My name means to bind, is a Hebrew name. To bring together, union. Don't we need a bit of that right now in our culture?
We do.
Everyone is so divided.
Yes, I think we need to heal and unite. That's what we need to do. I am also a fellow connector of things, so I think this is going to be a good episode and probably why we get on so well as well.
Yes.
All right, so today we're going to be in the relationship series and looking in particular at the psychology behind modern day dating apps, and what happens in our brain as we navigate through this, I guess, relatively new way of meeting people online. Okay, so before we start, can you remind everyone what realm you operate in as a professional?
So yeah, I am a qualified hypnotherapist. I trained in solution-focused hypnotherapy and past life hypnotherapy. So I do things like help people to stop smoking. I help people with fears and phobias, but also, the hypnotherapy is essentially the placebo effect. So it's really all about integrating the mind's own ability to heal itself within the body. And so I have worked with people who've got anxiety, stress, depression. I also like to take an esoteric approach to my work. I believe that the mind, body, and spirit are all interconnected when we're on a journey of healing, when we're in spaces of darkness in our life. And within that context, I take a personal interest in psychology and the human condition. I find it absolutely fascinating.
And I'd say we've become friends since the last episode.
So
we've had some really good conversations, and it's really interesting to see how the psychological aspects of our brain, of our brains, actually have a big impact on the way that we relate to each other as humans. So I'm really excited to see where this conversation goes.
I think it's really helpful as well, because I think sometimes we feel like so ashamed of our behaviors, our impulses, our addictions, or why am I so depressed? And then when you get a more kind of mechanical kind of look at it from the point of view of the brain and the body, it sort of helps you dissociate from it, where you're like, oh, that's not me, because it's not you, it's not the soul, it's not the essence of who you are, that's just how my body is operating. And then from that place, you're kind of split in two, and you can kind of approach different steps to move yourself away from your sort of your worst habits and so on.
Yeah. And you can put sort of your ego to one side as well and say, okay, that I'm having these feelings or these emotions because I know that 10 years ago, this happened, it triggers me, I'm aware of it, and therefore I'm understanding what I'm feeling right now, and I'm able to navigate through it, as opposed to just avoiding it completely and then wondering, why do I keep doing this every time I get into a relationship or try and connect with someone?
Yeah. Which is, and then it's the key to the door to healing and change. But what I will always say, we'll maybe bring this up later on, we talk about attachment styles, is that self-awareness is the starting point, and it's so important, because without that starting point there ain't no healing journey. But having said that, being aware, unfortunately, isn't going to stop those crushing triggers, that 90% of your subconscious mind that is going to eat you up when you are in those vulnerable spaces that trigger you. And most people, especially when it comes to trauma, our biggest triggers are relationships. And so you get people that go, I've done all this work, I understand myself, like I've healed, why am I going insane in this relationship? And it's like, it's because it's a very vulnerable spot. It really brings us to the core of who we are, and all of those wounds come out in that space.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think we are wired to live in community, and so any relationship we have will be reflections of our own character. But a romantic one will be the most intimate relationship, won't it? So it'll highlight all the dark areas of your soul.
Especially when sex is involved, because if you think about sex, when is the last time that you are comfortably fully naked in front of someone? When you're a baby. When you're a baby, you're naked, you're not judged. That's like literally the last time that you will be naked on that level. And then when you're an adult, there's a very real thing happening there when you're literally bare and vulnerable. And, when people are touching your skin, you release oxytocin, there's loads of hormones. So it really does bring us back to a very, that infantry side of ourselves really can come out,
Yeah, and if I can sort of link that to a Christian theological stance on the Garden of Eden, and how humans were naked before God and open in that childlike state. And then once they fell into sin, they had to cover their bodies because of the shame and the guilt. And all of a sudden the focus was on themselves and the ego state, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a connection there in terms of how we present ourselves and how we are really intimate with the people who see us in that
it's a
form.
Great metaphor, because people see the good, the bad, and the ugly, really, when you're in an intimate sexual relationship with someone. So there you go. And yet we live in a culture where sex is very fluid and it's just throw away, it's just a one night thing.
Yeah.
Obviously I have some views on that, but
yes, then we'll get to them, absolutely.
We will.
So I thought we could start with some lighter stuff first, or relatively lighter stuff. So have you yourself used any online dating apps? And the reason I highlight online dating apps is back in my day, you meet someone at school or college or university, you start dating, you fall in love, you get married, and that's it. Or you go to a bar, pick someone up. And when I say pick someone up, as in like you connect with someone and develop a relationship. And that's kind of the world I grew up in. But now coming out of that and entering into what looks like a completely different way of meeting people, my mind's blown. I'm like, what? You can just pick up these things now where you can swipe left, swipe right, and that's it. It's done. Like that was 4 seconds. Whereas, back then you'd have to build up some courage, go and talk to the girl that you thought was really pretty or whatever, or ask her friend, who is she, all that kind of thing. And now it's so transactional. It's blowing my mind. So that's why I wanted to highlight online dating at the moment. But have you used online dating? Have you had some experience with it?
Oh, I have indeed. I've been down that digital rabbit hole too many times. I was, very much like you, spent my 20s kind of meeting people, I suppose, just normally and organically. And interestingly enough, if I'm going to be anecdotal about it, I was never single in my 20s. And then as soon as I got on the apps, it was a different story. But I was a bit reluctant to get on them because I generally didn't like the concept of like reducing human beings to a mere catalogue. And I just don't think it's a very nice way to treat human beings. And I think after years of being on these apps, it's kind of cemented that point of view. But it was during the lockdown. So I was sort of like, well, I'm not going to meet someone in a bar. I'm not going to meet someone at a party, friend for a friend at work. And so I then downloaded my first dating app, and that was in 2020, so 4 years. And it's been interesting and I've learned a lot. But I will also add that, most of my friends now and family have all met on dating apps. That is the most common way for people to meet people. But what I do say to my friends is that the apps have changed. They're not what they used to be in the early days. And I think I joined the apps when that change was happening. So pre-pandemic, post-pandemics, apps are very different in terms of how they're set up. And I would argue that they're set up in a way to kind of keep people on them and keep people single and celibate and not actually meeting people. Whereas in the early, do you want me to get into what the differences are?
No, that was going to be my next question. What would you say were the differences?
Is that when back in the day, like, I don't know, let's just say pre-COVID.
Okay.
Dating apps were literally a picture, an age, and like a bio, right? Mm-hmm. So you see maybe a couple of pictures in a bio and that's it. Now dating apps are your pronouns, your gender, your kinks, your religious beliefs, your political beliefs, your height. And that's a big one. You've probably heard men complain a lot about that. So people wouldn't have had their height before on dating apps.
Mm-hmm. Wait, why would men complain about that?
Men complain about it because women overwhelmingly will swipe men who are 6 foot or taller, which actually I think only makes up a tiny % of the population.
Gotcha.
Which makes men go, well, women are very, very shallow, aren't they? I would argue, well, no, it's just reducing women to a more primitive state. And let's face it, if the pre-COVID, you didn't have to put your height on a dating app. So that is something that would have got overlooked. And also you might put something like, if you want kids, if you want to get married, if you're looking for intimacy, no commitment. So you've got all of these things, a checklist basically of things you have to put on. Now apps have got things like, what type of texter are you, And in theory, it sounds good, right? Like, oh, just more information, but it's not. It's a terrible idea because as, we've spoken about there, we're in a very divisive culture. And when we're looking at an app for 3 seconds whilst we're watching the TV, we're in a very passive kind of hypnagogic state. We're not really paying attention. And our minds are going to jump to the things that we don't like before they jump to the things that we do like. So height, political beliefs. Now, political beliefs is a big one, Like if you go to a party and you meet someone naturally and there's a bit of chemistry, you have a bit of fun, maybe you end up like snogging at the end of the night. Are you going to go home?
What parties are you going to?
Political beliefs and then go, I'm not going on a second date with them. Yeah. Absolutely not. So I think these protocols are just making apps, like they're just making them harder. People are swiping less. And if I'm going to do it from a sort of brain perspective, I would call it negative forecasting. So human beings, we are wired by nature to be negative. Yeah. It ensured our survival. So if we always saw the worst case scenario, if you lived in the woods and you're like, right, from the left, there's going to be a polar bear. From the right, there's going to be a tribe. This is my cave. That was a great thing that ensured our survival. So we are by nature wired to be negative. You throw that into the dating app mix, you start negatively forecasting, because it's how we're wired to do. So in other words, and I think I am speaking more for women than for men, because I think men are more visual in how they approach online dating. And I suppose perhaps women are maybe looking for more character traits, but they're going to be doing it from a negative forecasting, primitive perspective, which means they're looking for the worst before they're looking for the best. When you're looking for the worst before the best, what are you going to do? You're going to swipe past people. Yeah. So, yeah.
So it's like it's analyzing threat at every level, isn't it? Oh, this person has got this, so therefore this is going to happen. Or this person's not, like you said, tall enough, or this person's got a history that, I'm not even going to bother starting with them because I'm afraid of where it will go, etc.
Yeah, it's terrible. And also it's like, another thing that the apps do is it creates a dopamine kind of thing where like you're always thinking you're like, dopamine works for intermittent reward. So you're always swiping with a kind of subconscious belief, I suppose, that I'm one swipe away from the next best thing. And that kind of like dopamine is all about motivation. So you want to have a bit of a chase. So in other words, you're more likely to swipe past people because you've got this mentality that I'm one swipe away from my perfect person. So that's not going to happen. And in reality, there is no such thing as a perfect person. Like, human beings are flawed. We're all flawed. We never meet the perfect person. But we are reducing human beings to a catalogue kind of textbook type dynamic. And it's demonstrating itself to not work because the apps are like losing money. More and more people are going off them, and I'm not surprised. And we know that people are more single and they're more celibate than ever. And what is happening in that mix? Men and women are very angry with each other. Men think women are extremely shallow, and arguably they are, because it's making them very shallow. And women are finding men to be like players and F-boys, which isn't true either, but it's to do with the fact that 10%, all women are competing for the same 10% of men on these apps.
A lot to unpack there. Let's hold that 10% statistic because it'd be really good to go into that. But something that came to mind was, it's a question, it's a curious question. Do you think women generally, very generally, would be worse at swiping past men than men would be? Because I know this is going to, I don't mean to sound chauvinistic or sexist in the slightest, but if you go shopping, it's a very...
Well, that's what these apps are. You're going shopping.
Right, you're going shopping, right? So usually a guy would go, right, this is kind of what I want. And then they go into a shop. No, look, I don't want to project onto all guys. I'll go into a shop and I'll go, I need some blue jeans. And I go look through the jeans and I go, yeah, they'll do. They're good. All right, that one fits. Okay, great. I feel comfortable. I'm out and I'm happy. I've done my thing. I'm done. Whereas I think when I've shopped with women, at least in my experience, sisters, etc. Sorry, sister. Like, actually, my sister's pretty good. I shouldn't have brought her up, but she's like straight in, boom, I want that, and she's done. But like generally, when I've been with friends that are girls, there's this, oh, I like this dress, but actually there might be a better one out there, and then they spend 2 hours trying to find a better one, only to come back to the first dress that they saw initially and go, oh yeah, actually that is the one. So there's this desire, this want for more. Do you think that's a character thing, or do you think that is tied to
no? I think it's
sex?
I think it's a primitive thing.
Primitive
Women
thing.
have a very real 18-year consequence as to why they would be more selective about who they're going to partner up with.
Okay.
You know, and like, as much as I don't like to reduce everything to biology, there is just like, there are some biological realities that make men and women different. So women are naturally more selective when it comes to who they mate with and who they sleep with, because they're the bearers of the children. And men are, as we know, wired to be very promiscuous, and that is a normal, healthy side effect of masculinity. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think what that does in the dating context is that I think men are less selective in a way. You know, I think men are more visual when it comes to attraction. And if you think about it, if you are more visual, then dating apps in a way they're more straightforward in terms of who you're going to swipe. Like, and let's face it, women are attractive, aren't they? You know, like,
I'd say.
So I think men, and I mean, we know this, like data suggests that men are much more liberal swipers. They swipe on lots of women.
Right.
And I think women tend to be less visual when it comes to looking for a mate. But of course, they're on apps where it all becomes visual. So in a way, they're maybe operating from a part of themselves that isn't. I personally think, I can't speak to all women. I know lots and lots of women that find looks very important when they're looking for a partner. But I would argue that they're maybe slightly more archetypal in terms of how they swipe. So in other words, you know, if we're looking at it, you know, if we're reducing people to primitive behavior, then I guess you want the alpha male, right? You want someone who's got status. So height would be something that would come into that. But also, like, you know, you might swipe someone who's like the archetype of an artist. Oh, they've got a guitar, they're artistic, because that's alluding to something that they like. Or I'm adventurous, I'm outdoorsy. Or, you know, I'm the guy in the suit who works in the city with a cocktail. I'm not, you know, I'm being very reductive, but let's be real here. These apps are reductive. And as much as, yes, we should really be sitting and studying and reading up these bios and trying not to be so selective before we have a character attack on women, you know, because I do feel there's a lot of where women are just being shallow. I would argue, you know, it's a combination of it being primitive in these apps hijacking primitive centers where we are not studying and reading our bios. We are swiping very mindlessly, having a very quick glance. What do our brains do when we have a glance? We capture an image, it goes in our head. And so I would say men are seeing the image of like beauty, maybe swiping, and women are maybe from that more primitive point of view seeing an archetypal image. What do you allude to? And of course, what that means is women are much more choosy swipers. They're much more selective. So they're not swiping very many men. And then what is happening, and this has been proven literally in different Western cultures now, is that women are selecting, swiping the same 10% of men. So 90% of men are not getting matches. They're not getting dates. They're not getting laid. That's a terrible thing for a man, his masculinity, for his goal. I mean, like a man's sex drive is his get up and go in the morning. It's really important. And so men are involuntary celibate and they're angry about it. And of course they're angry about it because they feel like we don't have a seat at the table. At least you're getting a seat at the table with the 10%, with the top 10%. But of course the women aren't seeing it from that point of view because women are feeling horribly used. They're feeling like they're being reduced for their bodies and they can't pin a man down. They can't get commitment. They can't. And so basically the sexes are miserable, isolated, and angry at each other, to put it in a really like existential way. And even for the top 10% of men who are getting all the dates and are getting laid, I would argue that, well, you know, eating ice cream for breakfast sort of loses its deliciousness after a while, doesn't it? And I also think, you know, there's a real like reward system in the brain when you have to kind of court and chase a woman. It's called testosterone. Testosterone is all about goal and accomplishment.
Yeah.
And if something is too easy to come by, you're sort of actually reducing your own testosterone levels.
Makes so much sense. So you made so many points there.
All this stuff about hormones and everything is controversial. And look, I do believe that we are sentient, spiritual beings and we shouldn't have to reduce ourselves to our anatomy, but it does play a role into these things, and we cannot, it's undeniable that something isn't working right now when it comes to mating and courting and sex, because human, you know, the generation, the millennials and the Gen Zs, they're not having sex, so something's not going right, you know.
It's there's so much there. One of the things that came to mind was Jordan Peterson writes about the way that we connect, the way that we relate, the way that women select men is pretty much on point with what you were saying there. And so women would generally, I guess, I'll take away the analogy of swiping, but they would want to connect upwards. So status is huge for them because primitively speaking, throughout evolution, it's a survival of the fittest. So they want to mate with someone who's stronger, who's smarter, who's funnier, whatever characteristic you're looking for there, who can provide and protect, because it's going to elevate their status as well. Again, from a very primitive perspective. Whereas men tend to in their healthy masculinity tend to lead the way, and therefore don't look for that. They look for someone who can come and support and sort of come alongside in order to achieve the mission. You know, you touched on that with testosterone as well, the goal wherever they're trying to drive to. And so we see that throughout just the human species and other species as well. But because we're in this modern age, we kind of deny that exists. We're like, oh no, we've evolved past that. You know, we're way more sophisticated, which in some ways is true. But then you can't deny the way that we're made up as individuals, as humans.
No, exactly. And it's the same thing, like anger is a primitive emotion. You can't deny the existence of anger. You know, can anger overcome us? Absolutely. Can we become angry people? Yeah. But anybody that kind of goes, well, I never get angry, is like, well, you're actually denying something that's a very primitive, real thing in you. You can get angry without being a really angry person. So, you know, so many things, good and bad, do come from like our bodies and our evolution, and, you know.
Yeah, totally. And like with anger, for me, personally speaking, I'm a walk awayer. I'm like, okay, I'm getting to a place where I'm now very angry and I don't want to see where this goes. I'd rather just walk away. But that doesn't deny that their emotion isn't there, and that's not present and therefore needs to be addressed. Whereas I
Exactly.
think if you just go, oh no, don't bother me, no, at some point that's coming out somewhere, whether that's through a medical thing, or it could be a breakdown, it could be anxiety, it could be all sorts of stuff. So it's important that we address it.
We can overcome our impulses, in other words. It's not like, we are at the mercy of our sex drives or our shallowness or whatever. Of course, we can overcome those things, but those impulses arguably are a force that we're always dancing with, that are within us,
Yeah. So that was question 1.
Whoa, it's going to be a long podcast.
Well, I think we covered quite a lot. One of the questions I wanted to ask you in terms of dating apps. So in preparation for this, I've been on some and I've had a little look, and my mind was blown away at how, because I heard it's transactional. It's swipe left, swipe right. But you don't realize until you're on it how much that is true. Like, that's it. You're like, oh, okay. It literally is like going on to the next website and looking for some jeans, and that's it. Oh, these ones don't fit. I'm going to put my filters in this size, and you're like, and that's it. These humans start popping up, and it's mind blowing. It's crazy. Obviously not for people who've been doing it for a long time, but for me, I was like, wow, okay. So in terms of apps, is there one that you think is good? Is there one or two? I don't know. I haven't really got a number, but are there better apps out there at the moment?
So I've got a bit of insider information on that. So my cousin, actually, like a couple of years ago, so this was a few years ago, so it might have changed, but he worked, I think he does like business consultancy. So he works for an agency that essentially help businesses when they're kind of like losing money and not doing very well. And guess who one of the people were that came to his company? Bumble. And Bumble came because they weren't getting, I don't know, user satisfaction or whatever, and they wanted this company to kind of help analyze the statistics about how they could reform that. And so he had to do research in the world of dating apps, and guess who has the best user satisfaction rates and actual people meeting? Is Hinge.
Oh, it's Hinge. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm not surprised, because if you've been on the apps, like, there's a few things that Hinge have, like you can swipe backwards, which I think is really important. A lot of these things have this kind of like urgency where you swipe, and again, it's those dopamine receptors, and one away. You're in a hypnagogic state. You're not really paying attention to it because your mind's elsewhere. I mean, people are swiping while they're on the toilet, aren't they? And so then you can swipe past people, but then it allows you to have a beat where you go, oh, maybe I was a bit ruthless there, and you can go back. So I think that's important, the ability to go backwards once.
And you can do that on other apps, but you got to pay for it, right? Whereas on Hinge, it allows you to do that.
Yeah, exactly. That's a fair point. You can pay for it. And then the other thing about it is you can see who's liked you. Okay. So I think that in terms of the psychology, you're going to consider who you are selecting, because you know that they're going to see that they like you. And also I think, again, if you can see people who've liked you, you might see someone who you might not have originally swiped, and then you think, oh, actually they're okay and they like me. So they've got a wee bit of a setup. They're a little bit better than the other apps. And in Bumble, traditionally, I think it might have changed recently on Bumble. But on Bumble, it's the woman that makes the first move, and you have 24 hours to make that first move, and then the swipe's gone. And I guess the idea is it's putting in a bit of urgency. But interestingly enough, I do wonder, given that they had the worst stats, according to my cousin, if that's to do with the fact that we go back to that primitive nature of men and women. Women tend to not like the first move, even though there's this idea that we're doing it to empower women so that they feel safe, which is great. I mean, it's a good idea in terms of safeguarding and all that. But in reality, a lot of women don't like to make the first move, and so personally.
Wait, I'm going to pause you. I'm going to pause you because you make so many great points, and I want to come back on some of them. And one of them was with that the Bumble thing. I spoke to a friend of mine, and I was like, look, how do you deal with all this? And she said Bumble for her was the worst one because she just felt it was exhausting to be making the effort and then just be like nothing come back to her. So she was more likely to go on to Hinge and Tinder than she would be Bumble because of that. And that kind of makes sense with what you're saying there as well, because you're if you're in your primitive state, you want the man to make the move, right? Or at least have some kind of balance.
Yeah, I guess so. And also I think they have changed it now so that like it's either or. And I'm like, that's interesting. Why would they do that? Why would they do that?
Because of your cousin.
Well, no, because it's proving itself to, despite the fact that we want to deny some realities, it's proving itself to be true that, not everyone, of course, not everyone, but overall, women prefer men to make the first move. And, there's lots of, I don't mind making the first move, but there's just, I'm just not a fan of Bumble with the whole you've got 24 hours, you've got to talk to someone or they're gone.
Do you know, so a friend of mine, my dear friend, whose name I won't mention, he went on a speed dating app years ago. This is not an app, sorry, a speed dating, real life.
All online dating, speed dating. It's like speed dating on steroids. It's like speed.
I was catching myself.
Like
so he went to this
dating night.
He went to a real speed dating night, and he went right, and he met this girl. She liked him. He was like, yeah, she's nice, etc. Anyway, after the event, I think the story is that she approached him, like outside, and said, "Listen, I really liked you. Give me your number. Here's my number, whatever." So she actually made that move, and she's very firm about it, and she was very intentional about her liking him. And they are happily married 2 kids later, and they've have got a great relationship and married. And you just think, actually, there is no shame or nothing wrong with the woman making the first move if she likes,
Women make the first move. I mean, totally. I don't think it's undeniable. But interestingly enough, you're talking about digital versus reality, and in reality, there's you might be more likely to approach someone when you can feel something. You can feel like energy is a real thing. You can feel chemistry. You can feel, kind of removing that side out of the
playing with the hair. Oh, she's playing with the hair while she's talking to me. Does that mean something? Does it not? Yeah. What's going on? And then you're kind of like responding to all of that stuff. And then the other,
they were on a speed dating night. So she knew that he was single and looking, so that changes the dynamic as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. Which reminds me of the point I was going to make to yours, which was about that when you know someone likes you, going back to high school now, you're in your friendship group, it's all good, but as soon as you find out, that girl likes me, I never considered her in that way, but I think I will now. Let me just have could that work, etc. So there is definitely something to be said of like reciprocation or someone creating a spark out of nowhere that then, could lead into something or not.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay. All right. Hinge, just while we're talking about good dating apps, I found it really interesting because it's not a bio, is it? I think it's a few pictures. You can put in a few things like you said before, your age, your height, etc. But actually, when you're looking through it, there's little prompts and little quotes and little things that people have put about their personality, which makes it far more interesting to go, ooh, that could be a good vibe or not, compared to just a picture where you were swiping left and right. So I think that has that going for it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's what they call the prompts, I think.
Prompts, yeah. Yeah, so that's quite good. Yes, so Hinge, if you want to sponsor this.
It goes back to the less is more in a way, doesn't it? Like I sort of sometimes feel like again, going from that negative forecasting point of view, people are wired to see the negative. The more information you give, the more nitpicky people become. I mean, it's terrible and it shouldn't be like that. But we live in.
So I went on Tinder because that's probably that's the only one I've really heard of outside of ever going on a dating app. So I went on it, and then I was like, all right, let me put some stuff in. Let's see what happens. So I put some stuff in, and not much was going. I didn't get much back, like nothing going on. And then I was like, oh, what if I put nothing in? I'm literally just playing with data, right? One man band over here. So I deleted everything. So there's nothing except just pictures. And then the likes went up from like 1 or 2 to like 25 to 30. And I was like, isn't that something? Like exactly what you're saying there. That there's a mystery aspect that people
and
are
like
interested
I said, people before 2020, that was pretty much just what apps were. And like overwhelmingly, most of the people I know who are partnered up, who met someone on the apps, they all met on the apps pre-COVID, before before we lived in this just like internet culture on steroids, So
yeah. Well, if you have if you came across this podcast, I'm talking to people who are listening, and liked me on Tinder, Just now I'm a cheapskate. I haven't paid for it, so I don't even know that because you can't see them. I was just looking at numbers just to see what would
don't
happen.
need to pay paying for. I don't think paying for these apps makes any difference. I do think maybe it's different. It is. I mean, it is different. The apps are different for men and women, but I don't think.
But I don't think you could see who likes you though, unless you pay for the app. On Tinder anyway. I think you can
Yeah,
with
you
the other one you were
can't
saying.
see who likes, but does that make a big difference? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I'm sort of like of the view, so many people, like friends and family, who are so patronizing, they don't understand what it's like. But they all go, maybe you should pay for like one of the more kind of more premium elite
Right.
apps. Like I guess like Match,
Oh yeah,
And
Match has been around for a long time.
I know the idea is it's you everyone pays, you know what I mean, and it's
Right.
I don't know, not necessarily more exclusive. It's meant to help people, and I'm like, it's all nonsense. I keep saying, I live in Glasgow. I'm sure out of 1,000 single men in Glasgow, there's got to be a match for me. But for whatever reason, I'm not finding them, and they're not finding me. And it doesn't matter what app. Personally, I've found that every single app has literally all the same people on it. And it's so depressing, man. Anyone who's single, been single for a while, might relate to me on this. Like, there's people now that I see on the apps, and I'm like, I really recognize you because you've been on these apps for years, as of how depressing is that? Which makes me, I do think when I look at people, and I think, well, how have you been single for years? And how have I been single for years? Like, it seems to me that the apps are the same people have just been probably circulating around and going on terrible dates for 5 years. I'm like, surely in that big pool, there's matches for everyone. And the other weird thing that has happened to me on numerous occasions is I've walked down the street and I've literally recognized someone, like they're like a C-list celebrity in my own life. And I'm like, I recognize you from the apps. I haven't matched with you. I haven't spoken to you. I just recognize you from swiping. And I can see, because they've clocked me, that they recognize me for the same reason. And I'm like, what is this world we're in? Like, it's so depressing,
What's more awkward, seeing each other knowing that you've seen each other and never swiped right on each other, or seeing someone that you have swiped right on but never matched back with you or something like that?
I mean, that's kind of, I don't know. That's a bit of a weird one. But I guess it's both. There's just, but anyway, my point is that
it's all
there
awkward.
is absolutely, without question, matches. Love is not like exclusive. Like anyone can find love, anyone can find a partner. I totally believe it. And I'm sure, like, out of all of these single people in different areas all over the world, there's a match. And I'd also just like to add another little like anecdotal story, which was that so I used to work as a nanny, and I worked in America for very wealthy families. And one of the other nannies that I worked for was in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
She was a nanny as well. So we worked together, and she was this beautiful blonde, blue-eyed, tanned, all-American girl. And obviously, Oklahoma has a slightly different culture. It's very Christian. It's like Trump guns, And but she was lovely. We got on like a house on fire, and she was single. And I met her in 2019, and then I saw her again just there in 2024 because she was working as a nanny in London.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up reconnecting with her, and I was like, oh, it's been 5 years. Surely she's got a boyfriend by now. So I was like, oh, are you with anyone? She was like, no. And she was like, just had a sort of 3-month kind of, situationship that ended. And I thought, oh, here we go. And I just thought, I know it's very anecdotal, but to me, there's no reason why someone like her should be single. There's lots of Christians in her area that are like her. She's been single for 5 years. She's intelligent. She works as a teacher. She's funny, beautiful. She's been single for the last 5 years.
Mm.
And I just know that that's to do with our dating app culture. And unanimously, for me, most of my single female friends have been single for years. And it just doesn't add up. I just don't feel that, like, something to me doesn't seem quite right about that. And given that it's happening on the other side of the pond as well, I'm like, this is happening all over the world.
Yes.
And of course, I personally do blame the digital era that we live in. And I'm not just talking about apps. I'm talking about porn. I'm talking about Instagram. I'm talking about the whole lot, I think it's separating us.
Makes a lot of sense, because if you're finding that animalistic desire, the dopamine that you referred to earlier on, available to you in a couple of minutes, swiping left, right with the dating apps, or, I mean, even if you take it as as surface level as watching TV, right? So you're watching a drama. Everything in that show has got everything you would want from the real world. You're crying, you're happy, you've seen some action, you've seen some romance, whatever it is that you kind of, all those emotions are happening within the space of a 40-minute episode, let's say. There's no desire to go out into the real world and experience things because you get caught in this binge of watching whatever it is that you're watching.
Absolutely. And I think for some people, not everyone, but I think it's, enabling avoidance. We'll obviously talk later on about attachment styles, but I think if you are, for example, someone with a very avoidant attachment style, then we are in a culture that's just massively going to enable you into hermit mode because you can get your connections safely, but in a digital way, And also, right, I'm just going to say this, obviously I'm speaking from a very feminine perspective here. And I suppose a lot of my stuff is quite biased because I'm speaking from the point of view of
I'll balance it out with the masculine over here, okay?
Well, there you go. We balanced it out. So, if you think about history in terms of the internet, at the moment, we've got porn. And I think there's at least a bit more of a universal recognition that porn's addictive. It's not very good for men. I think men more and more are probably, hopefully, trying to abstain from it, recognizing this isn't good for me. But regardless, you've got Instagram, which is just an ocean of posing and pouting and, beautiful women exhibiting themselves. So you can, from a male point of view, you can still see beautiful women, can't you? And if you think about a time in history before Instagram, before porn, before even porn magazines, if you were a guy with a healthy sex drive, you would have never have seen a naked woman. Just imagine that. Imagine that desire and that motivation to be to get sex, to see a beautiful naked woman. And that desire and that motivation would make you leave your house. It would make you talk to a woman, and it would make you sit and nod and agree and listen to our boring stories, go for walks and watch our boring films. Because at the very end of it, there'd be a very real reward, and that you would get sex, and you would say, "Women, isn't that amazing?" And that's very, very important because that's part of the courting process. It's called bonding.
Yeah.
So then what happens is that, it's very natural and very primitive for a man after he has had sex to kind of withdraw because his testosterone tanks. What's the fastest way a man's testosterone rebuilds? Through sleep. What's the first thing that happens after sex if a man falls asleep? Because his testosterone's tanked. But the thing is that when he's going into that withdrawal phase, that woman is a 3-dimensional person who he's gotten to know and who, and so that is a really important part of courting and mating, which arguably is being removed now because men, you can see naked women at the click of a button. So I don't know what that does to motivation in terms of wanting to meet real women. But even if you do meet real women, we're in a culture that encourages fluidity and sexual empowerment, which is great. We needed to have a sexual revolution in the 60s. But as Pamela Anderson puts it, and I agree with her, we now need to have a sensual revolution. Sex has become reductive, transactional, one-night stands. But from the perspective of a man, if you're going out and you go on one date, have one drink, have sex with a woman, you don't know her. She's not 3-dimensional. And then arguably, ping, your phone goes, match, new women, you can get sex elsewhere. So I just think, and I know that I'm probably referring more to this pool of the 10%.
Sure.
But in other words, accessibility to naked women and beautiful women is taking away that very, very important courting and bonding process, which forms relationships in the first place. And it also makes women feel hopefully a little bit more valued and less used and violated the second that a man vanishes into dust after he's slept with you, which is trust me, terrible, terrible, horrible, violating feeling. For me personally, it doesn't feel consensual under that premise. If somebody, I'm not sleeping with someone with the expectation that they're just going to disappear. Sorry, I'm totally going off on a tangent here.
No, it's interesting.
But again, there was a time in history not that long ago, if you hooked up with someone from work on a work night out, they had to face the music. You would see them on Monday morning. So they wouldn't be completely gone. There wouldn't be no accountability or responsibility. Whereas now, arguably, when you meet someone, what do you have in common? A telephone number, and that is it. You don't have friends in common, a workplace in common, or even a bar in common. So it makes that vanishing act and the ghosting so much easier to happen.
And blocking them as well, because like I grew up when we didn't have mobiles, right? So you had a telephone on the wall, right? Someone calls you, they know your number, they can get you anytime. Whereas now you can block people on all the apps that you're using, whether it's WhatsApp, it's iMessage, whatever it is. So it, just to further illustrate your point, it is easy to do, can I use the word do instead of swearing, and then forget and then move on. Yeah.
It's just, to me, it's a form of, like, I've just read a book called Avoidant Abuse, it's about avoidant attachment styles and how, like, the silent treatment can be used as a form of punishment. They refer to it as banishment, and it's true. If someone just blocks you, it's a form of banishment, and it leaves you feeling bewildered, confused, starved of answers, with an inability to move on. And in a way, we're just like, but that's normal. That's just part of our culture. Like, I get ghosted in business. My friends ghost me. And I'm like, different thing. You cannot compare two different departments. Like, there is a myriad of hormones and bonding. There are emotions. There's the vulnerability thing that we spoke about, how it brings us back to our most infantry state when sex is involved, whatever your views are on sex. And so when somebody just vanishes into dust and cuts you out or blocks you, it is a very brutal experience to be on the receiving end of. Of course, that is without, in the cases of, it's consensual and that you're both very clear. We do live in a world now where you can state on apps, I want intimacy with no commitments, and there's a mutual understanding that, look, this is about sex, this is a one night stand, this is all we're going to have. I mean, it's not for me, but like that is possible. But I, sort of sense just from reading women online and women getting a bit angry and annoyed, I think it's not always happening without that communication that this is just a one night thing.
And plus, like, you could go into something thinking, okay, this is why we're doing this, because I have an itch that needs scratching, you have an itch that needs scratching, we're just going to keep it like that, we're not going to let anything develop. But again, then you're denying the reality of the experience of human beings. And I believe, it's my view, is that sex has a spiritual aspect to it. It's not just in the physical. There is something about your energy, your spirit connecting with someone else, which again, if I use go back to Christian theology, sex is marriage. So when you have sex with someone, you're married to them because you've bonded, which is why, you can annul a marriage even modern day if you haven't had sex because you haven't consummated the marriage, right? There is a connection between those two dimensions, let's say. And I think when... This is just my view. Obviously, everyone has different views and, power to them, whatever. But like if people see it as a, just, I'm just going to have sex because, I like having sex, you like having sex, boom, we're going to do it and then off we go. I think you're kind of being really naive about the process that's going to take place and the impact it's going to have on both people, man and woman.
I totally agree. I kind of wish people would be a bit more real about sex, and actually that it does come with a consequence, and I'm not just talking about pregnancy and STIs, although arguably they are also consequences of sex,
of course,
maybe why we are designed to be a little bit more selective. But again, I hate to reduce things to biology, but it's true. Like, when we have sex, when we're skin on skin with someone, we release oxytocin, which is a love and bonding hormone. And I think men, when they're watching porn, don't release that hormone. So that's the kind of missing link. So it becomes, you're really like blowing out your dopamine receptors like a fuse, and it becomes addictive. Men do produce oxytocin, but they're more likely to produce more oxytocin the more bonded they've been with that woman through that courting process of getting to know them. So they're producing less of it if they don't know that woman. Whereas women, when women have orgasms, they produce a lot of oxytocin, which is the same hormone that you release when you're giving birth. I mean, it's a love and bonding hormone. And
which then when the guy has gone, right, my testosterone's tanked, I'm withdrawing now, which then sends signals to that woman who's releasing these oxytocins, going, wait, hang on, what's happening? There's this surge
Yeah.
of
Nature made
chemical
us very
reaction.
different.
Yeah,
Of
yeah,
course,
yeah.
like men fall asleep and women are like, talk to me after sex, you know. But it's like, and another thing is estrogen. And so women produce a lot of estrogen, which is also a bonding and social hormone, you know, you want to talk. And like men, don't get me wrong, when they're testosterone tanks, they need to go and restore it. That like that's their power hormones, their life force energy, and they do that by like, you know, working hard, being busy, being savage, being manly.
You
And then
said
they
something
build
like
that
that.
up, and then all their sex drive and their juices are back, and then they go back to their women and they want to make love to her. But if we understood that,
Yeah.
women can understand after sex, I need to pull back, I need to bond with my friends, because when women talk, we release more estrogen, it makes us feel good. Men need to go and be, you know, do their thing, be in their man cave for a while, we build their testosterone. That's an important part of it. But then of course, when we're going back to this like sort of one night stand culture and all that kind of stuff, it's not that you can overlook these things. You can have a one night stand and be like, fine. But another thing that a woman gets is like the egg. Women are much more likely to get the egg if they're not like attracted to men.
So,
You know,
just
and of course, there has
explain.
to have been an element of bonding. It doesn't necessarily have to be a
Right.
deep emotional connection, but like women are more likely to get the ick after a one night stand if they're not producing that like oxytocin and bonding hormone, which in fairness isn't a very healthy response to sex, is it? Like it shouldn't be a case of like, I'm really attached to you, or I feel the ick. And of course, there's exceptions to all of that.
Of course.
Those are realities that you're overlooking. And also going back to sex being sacred, you know, sex is one of the greatest things we can experience in the human form. You know, we can reach incredible heights and paradigms of pleasure. Like you can literally have an out of body experience when you explore pleasure and tantra and sex, you know, and we're taking all of that good stuff away by making it so robotic and so transactional. And I meet you in an app and you meet me, you know, and I do think that's very sad, because I think we're taking something that's amazing and great and spiritual and sacred and just ruining it, quite honestly, you know.
Yeah. Devaluing what it is. Yeah, absolutely agree. A few things you said there. One of the things that my brain went to is, I don't know if you ever watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but there's an episode where the captain, he's just not productive at all, and he's frustrated and he's taking it out on the staff, and they're like trying to work out what's going on, and then one of them has the audacity to say to him, you just need to go get laid. Like, go and see your partner and go get laid. And he's so offended that a subordinate would be able to say that in a professional capacity. It is a comedy, to be fair. So the tension builds up, whatever. And what happens is he actually goes and gets laid, you know, with his partner. He comes back and he's good to go again. He's productive. He's you know, like that's been released from him, which, you know, ties into what I know it's just a TV show, but like it ties into the psychology of what is that source energy for men, like why the way we're wired. And so when I've been working with men's groups and stuff like that and talking to guys, I mean, it's really sad. I think of this one guy, I hope he doesn't watch this, I won't say his name, but he was saying how he hopes that his sexual drive would just diminish. Like he's been married for a long time. He's obviously not having sex, and he was like, "I wish that this was taken away from me, because it's a curse. Because I don't want to have these desires. I don't want to have this energy." I know, it was so sad. And then,
do you know what that is? There's a reason why women lose their sex drive in marriage and relationships. Because I mean, it's, you know, we all hear about it, don't we? Is that when like couples stop having sex, and you know, there's different reasons for it, but like dopamine actually helps women build up estrogen, and estrogen is what arouses them and turns them on as well. And so obviously if you're in a long-term marriage, things like menopause and all that can play a part in that, because your estrogen levels are going down. And then, so of course, when you first meet someone, your dopamine receptors are going wild. And so you're building up lots of estrogen. It's also interesting because if people are intermittent, you know, if they send you breadcrumbs, if they're hot and cold, that's going to send your dopamine receptors wild, make you build up estrogen, which might be a kind of reductive example of why women get addicted to players and bad boys, you know?
Makes sense.
Because they're coming and going and confusing them. And anyway, so when you first meet someone, there's loads of dopamine and all that good stuff, and that drives you to have sex. But then when you go beyond that point, women build up estrogen through like communication and talking and feeling like they're being listened to, and men are problem solvers. So, you know, if a man comes home and a woman's moaning about her day, he's like, well, what's the problem? What can I do to fix it? And then she's going, oh, why need to fix it? What's your problem? And then there's conflict because he's like, why aren't you happy? Now I feel like a bad person. I want you to be happy. I want to fix it. I want to make you happy. And in reality, if we could learn about the gender differences and how our hormones play a role, then it can help, you know? So it's like, well, no, actually, sometimes women just need to talk, because when they talk, they release estrogen and their cortisol goes down and they feel less stress and they feel better. So you just have to listen. But also, arguably, women need to have female friends where they can talk more, because it's a stress relieving thing for women and it reduces their estrogen. Whereas for men, an element of cortisol is actually good for men.
Yeah, I agree.
And so again, just like understanding those gender differences and those hormone differences. I mean, don't get me wrong, of course, there's so many factors, but I do just think the more and more I dive into my work, the more and more I'm like, wow, men and women are so different. We do have different brains. Women have a very, very largely developed emotional cortex of the brain, but much bigger than a man. In other words, women generally are more emotionally intelligent, which is why women can be a bit like, why can't you read my mind? You should know why I'm upset. Because a woman would understand that about one of her female friends, because she's more emotionally intelligent. We have different brains. We have different hormones. We're like a lion and a tiger, powerful, mighty, brilliant, but very different animals. And I sort of feel like if we understood those dynamics, if we educated ourselves on those differences, it would really help us when it comes to courting and sex and relationships, and then further down the line, marriages, when the sex starts to fizzle out. How can we understand how to build up the hormones that give us sexual attraction and desire again, you know?
Yeah, well put. The masculine in me wants to know that when you're talking about lions and tigers, were you referring to the lion as the men? Because, like, you know, it was a competition.
Yes, and the women are the tigers.
The other thing that you said earlier on that sparked something in my brain was I went to a conference a few years ago, and it was a men's conference, and one of the guys that came up, he really had a problem with pornography. Maybe he was in his 50s, so he's lived he's lived a bit, and he just said he had such an issue with pornography, and he overcame it. And there was lots going on there, too much to unpack in this podcast, but the link to what you were saying was that he found, and studies showed, that men who consumed pornography were more aggressive in nature. And so there was a link between violence and pornography. And of course you can go down the road of, okay, because, you know, you start to see women as objects, and you know that comes out emotionally as well when you're talking to women, etc. Granted, I think, you know, no one really disputes that. But what's interesting to me, and the link to what you were saying there, is if men are watching pornography, getting their fix in that way, but not getting the oxytocin that comes with that skin to skin afterwards, then there's going to be this frustration. There's going to be this lack that they are feeling like, oh, where's that part of it? That's the part I need, because as a young boy, my mum used to cuddle me and etc. So now that I've given away the most intimate part of myself in that moment, where is that? You know, where is that hug? Where is that reassurance? Where is that I love you, you're my big strong man, whatever? And so that then turns into anger and violence. And I thought that's I'm not condoning violence by any means, but I'm just saying that could be a little bit of a missing link there.
And estrogen, men release estrogen, you know, when they're having sex as well. So, which obviously softens you, makes you a bit more social and all that kind of stuff. But then I don't know, I would argue that if you're watching porn all the time, you're really depleting your testosterone.
Right.
You know, because you're watching porn, you're depleting, and you're using out your dopamine receptors like a fuse box. So you're really depleted in dopamine. And I don't know, I guess that could rattle you, make you dysregulated, and make you maybe more aggressive. But testosterone, when you have a lot of testosterone, can make you quite aggressive too. That's why fighters are always encouraged to abstain from anything sexual before a fight, aren't they?
Yeah. That famous Friends episode where I think Monica's new boyfriend is going into a fight, and then his manager's like, no, boom boom before fight. It's like
very real thing. So in Chinese Taoism, they talk about how men have to abstain from like ejaculating basically, because it builds up their kind of sexual energy and their man force energy. And it's also, for some people, semen retention can be quite a spiritual thing and a journey of going inward, building up your masculine and your sexual energy.
Really?
And if you are, I think it's like your testosterone, which is your power hormone, that's the hormone you want, it doubles. So if you're in your 20s, it doubles on the 4th day. If you're in your 30s, the 6th day. In other words, you're doubling the number. In your 40s, the 8th day. So if you abstain for that long, on like the 6th day, your testosterone will double.
Interesting.
And then, but it is interesting because in that dynamic, then what does sex become about? Sex becomes about, like, how can a man enjoy sex without that end goal? It becomes about like kind of pleasuring the women. So in Tantra, like, women are the guides. And, men and women have very different, like, literally we have very different bodies. So a man is ready for penetration, like brain ready, blood flow ready, hormones ready in 1 minute, 60 seconds. And a woman, for her brain and her hormones and her juices and her blood flow and everything to be all good to go for penetration is 30 minutes. Now, why would nature make us so different?
It's a cosmic joke, I tell you.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. Like, of course, you don't have to stick by that as a manual. Like, of course, you can have sex in a couple of minutes or orgasm in a couple of minutes if you're a woman. But I would argue that you're speeding up something that is designed by nature to take its time. So you're missing out on all the good stuff. And why would nature make us so different? Maybe because in that space, men are meant to kind of pleasure and please a woman and take more time to get a woman to that point. And of course, we know that men have the reward accomplishment center in there. So, if they're working towards a goal, that's also going to add to the pleasure of their own orgasm and crescendo as well.
Yeah.
But there's a reason nature made us different. There has to be.
It makes so much sense because we're talking about that in the physical intimacy space. But if you take that into the social intimacy space, it's the same formula, right? Guys are like, good to go. I like that girl. Let's go, right? I don't just mean sexually, but let's just go. Let's start a relationship. Let's go. Whereas a woman would be, okay, hang on, you've got to woo me a little bit. You've got to give me some time to get in this zone. I need to feel your energy. I need to feel like this is okay. Taking away the safety aspect of it and, the protection aspect of wanting to feel those things. But there is an element of, right, let's take some time. Whereas men are very goal orientated,
Foreplay starts outside of the bedroom, like chemistry, connection. You make me laugh. You're funny. You're telling me I'm beautiful. All that good stuff, like that, is important. And I always just think it's interesting if you look at the gay world. Like, the gay world is just like the men and like gay men. It's just on steroids. I know gay men who want relationships, and it's just like, oh my God, it's so hard. You match with someone and the conversation is imminently crude. And if you just say something like, hello, how are you? How's the weather? You get blocked.
You're blocked. Oh my gosh.
And I just think, well, there's an interesting example. You cannot deny the reality of that's men on men. And now we're in a world where you can get sex and it's just gone crazy. So you've lost all of that kind of bonding and courting, and everything's just become so hyper-sexualized. And yet in the heterosexual world, things are becoming... it's not quite on that scale, but we're missing out on that lovely, like, takes a woman 30 minutes to be ready for penetration. But as a metaphor, it takes a woman a bit of time to get to the place where she's ready to be intimate with a partner. We're losing that as well because we live in like one night stand culture, sleep with someone on the second or third date. And maybe nature is actually telling us, if we're using that as a metaphor in terms of how our bodies work, that we need to take our time to get to that stage. But that's not going to happen. Because if you refuse to give a man sex in this culture, I feel like you're kind of going to... Sorry, I'm getting very personal now. I sort of feel like if you don't give out, then men have other options. So they just go to their other options.
It makes sense, like logically makes sense. It's not okay, but it makes sense. And I think from the man's perspective, there is an element of wanting to be the provider and the hero and be trusted and respected and all of those things. And when you're projected onto by a F-boy, let's say, and you're just like one of those, you almost go, well, the nice guy doesn't win. So then you take on the persona of the bad guy, which then goes back into, getting her receptors up and down and all over the place. Her estrogen levels are up, like you said earlier on. And then you take that persona on, not even wanting to do that because you think that that's going to get you results. So it's kind of like both sides are feeding into something that's quite unhealthy.
Yeah. Of course, then I don't want to overlook the fact that 90% of men aren't getting dates and laid. And I do read comments when I see like women talking about these things, and a lot of men are going, well, it's your own fault. You asked for it. You're going for the 10%. I don't think women realize when they're going, I don't think they realize they are going with the 10%. I don't think they realize that they are being shallow because, again, it's primitive and subconscious. And so, of course, there are lots of men out there going, I wouldn't do that. So what are you talking about? But I'm not getting a seat at the table. So it's kind of like it's warping our perceptions of masculinity and femininity.
Which is why I think the answer is, or part of the answer is, authenticity. Like, be who you are as much as you possibly can without, having those layers of protection, of course, not throwing everything on the table at once, but like, be who you are. And if you naturally would laugh at a particular joke, then laugh at that joke. If you naturally lean somewhere politically, then lean somewhere politically. It's fine. Because then I think only then are you going to make actual authentic connections with people. And it's only in that space is there going to be a spark for something that has longevity. Otherwise, you're trying to be a version of yourself that you aren't actually are, not knowing that the other person's projecting something that they aren't actually. And that relationship from the very beginning is doomed. You're only going to come to a crossroad where both of you are not even being who you are, and therefore having fights and, being toxic because you're not your authentic self. Now, how we get there, I have no clue, but I think, that's at least my interpretation of how we can move forward healthily.
Authenticity wins every single time.
Yeah.
Although I would say, how authentic can you be if you don't understand yourself and your own?
Agreed.
So if you are very, very attracted to somebody, and you start saying things like, oh, I would love to kind of take this further, and making promises that perhaps you can't fulfill based on the fact that you maybe aren't aware that you've got the rose-tinted glasses of we haven't had sex yet, and there's all of those hormones making you very excited and lustful towards that person. And then as soon as you've had that sex, all that goes away and common sense comes in. You're like, actually, I'm too busy. I can't do this. I don't have time. So I think that can be confusing as well.
Yeah. And having that, this whole thing about self-love, you've got to love yourself first before you can love someone else. And I actually agree with that. I think that's very true. But then it comes back to what you said early on in the podcast about, that's all very well. And you can come to some amazing self-realizations, actualizations, and, get to a space. But it's only in relationship do you then get reflected what are those darker triggers that you're kind of maybe not bringing to the surface or can't bring to the surface by yourself because you need that other person to do that. So it's kind of like everything is a bit of a balance, it's I wouldn't say it's as tight as a tightrope, but it's a narrow road. And it's about, okay, can I stay on the path? And when I stumble off, can I be authentic enough to take accountability and come back and say, hey, we went on a date a few weeks ago and I know we ended it, but actually I've actually been thinking about you a lot. Can we maybe try again or whatever? And that takes a humble spirit, doesn't it? It takes
courage.
It takes courage. Yes, on brand. I like that. But it does. Yeah. I wanted to make a quick point in reference to pornography. You mentioned it before. I was speaking to a deputy head teacher, I think it was, and he said one of the biggest challenges in his school was getting boys, in particular, off porn in class. And I was like, what?
That's wild.
I was like, what?
We're doing our children a massive disservice. That's so sad. It's actually so sad because what we're doing is we're ruining their sex lives when they grow up.
They haven't even had a chance to.
It makes us much more likely to make you impotent in the bedroom. It's much more likely to desensitize you from pleasure from a real woman. And that, like we've talked about, sex is one of the greatest human joys in life. And it's not about being prude, but if kids are overly exposed to that, we are literally ruining all of that good stuff and taking it away from them. I think it's so tragic. And I don't know what you do about that and how you regulate it and how you educate. As a parent, you can't talk to your kids about porn and sex. I mean, you could try, but it would be very, I know if I was a teenager, I'd find that absolutely horrifying and embarrassing. I wouldn't want to. So, but I suppose men need boys and girls, but we need good role models.
Yes.
Young boys need good masculine role models to guide them and navigate them.
Yeah. And it's almost like that role model has to come alongside and say, hey, that stuff's bad for you, man. That stuff's bad for you. But if you're interested in girls, hey, here's an avenue to go down. Like, because I think what happens is we tell young boys, as a society, that's wrong. Don't do that. Don't do that. But then now that they've been exposed to it, they're like, oh, where do I put this? Where do I put this energy? Where do I put this this curiosity? And we don't give them an avenue to go, well, actually, relationships are really important. And the way that you treat a woman is really important. And sex is important. But actually, here's a healthier view on it. And, here are the pros and cons or whatever, whatever you want to go down. But having like no education on it, or very little education, that's really confusing as well for a youngster who's trying to navigate.
It's making boys feel bad about the fact that they have sexual impulses and desires. Mm-hmm. It's this kind of, ooh, you're a creep, you're a perv, you're a predator.
Yeah.
And actually it's like, well, no, it is a very normal, healthy part of growing up and becoming a man, is you are going to have these really massive desires and impulses. And obviously it's of the utmost important that we educate our boys how to be respectful and and about consent and everything, of course. But we don't, I guess what we don't want is it going the reverse way, where boys feel that there's something really wrong about them having a sex drive and having sexual attraction and wanting to court and chase a woman, because like you exactly bang the nail on the head. Where's all that energy going to go? Well, it's going to get channeled and charged into pornography. So
yeah, totally. And I think from what I've heard, if you start down that path, you become desensitized to what you're watching, and therefore you watch worse things to the point where you just gone down some real dark places.
Well, it gets more and more addictive, doesn't it? It's like one, it might be that one day just seeing a woman's bra would make you go, wah! And then before you know it, it's just off the scale, like, like the darker side of porn.
I think if
you can see that from the apps, going back to the apps, like I sort of feel like kinks are getting more and more extreme, people like violence in the bedroom, and I'm not going to mention some of the things that people like to do, just to kind of try and keep this podcast.
Yeah, let's keep it. Let's keep it.
Think, whatever happened? And there's loads of people that put don't like vanilla, not vanilla. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like orgasmic out of body pleasure? Like when did like normal, just amazing, sensual, connecting sex become boring? And I would say that's because we're becoming desensitized. And I'm not, there's nothing wrong with play and exploration. Sure. And it's great fun. And I think it's so good that we're in a culture that encourages us to be open and explore our sexual sides. But at the same time, I'm like, why is everybody so into sort of these more extreme types of kinks and sex? And why is it that normal sex, which is again arguably one of the greatest human pleasurable experiences we can have, being referred to as bland ice cream, it's vanilla, it's boring, something seems a bit off to me there. But,
and then we're playing back into that negative human tendency to go, oh, actually, if that's boring, or if the trend or the fashion is that's boring, maybe I should be going out there to keep up with the Joneses and do things that I wouldn't normally want to do, and actually not enjoy it, but say, oh, at least I've done this, at least I've done that. So again, we're feeding into people's fears, anxieties, and that whole ego state again to go, oh, I need to be as good as XYZ in bed or whatever.
And porn does that too, because of course, let's not deny the fact that women watch porn as well. It's not just men. I think it is more consumed by men and women.
I think the numbers you're starting to see a shift in the numbers, definitely.
Yeah, so all of us are enjoying pleasure in a very digital way and not with each other. Seems like a shame. But I have spoken to men that talk about this more performative sex, where people are performing, and where are they getting that from? Like if you're learning about sex education through porn and you're seeing women screaming their heads off when they're having orgasm. And the problem with that is that as soon as you're in the bedroom and you're in a performative energy, you're not in a sexual energy, are you? You're moving away from that.
Yeah, and you're kind of taken away from the experience in front of you because it's not matching up to.
It's desensitizing it. It's taking away from the sensuality of it, and it's about how can we educate our men and women, because women have complicated bodies, and trying for women to understand themselves, their own complicated bodies, and to get tuned into their body and not think like I have to perform when I'm having sex. How can a woman explore herself and her own sensuality and be in herself and not feel this need to perform, maybe based on the fact that she's getting a template of this is what sex looks like based on porn, you know?
Yeah. While I have you, I want you to sort of unpack a little bit of attachment styles in this space as well.
Yeah.
So
attachment styles, very interesting.
Yes, we definitely have bonded over the interest of the attachment styles. But I was thinking in terms of like online dating.
I don't know. It's really hard because like remember the attachment styles usually start to happen when we bond, and we're not really bonded when we're in a digital space, are we? So I say we're kind of equal game players up until that point. It's once you excuse me. It's once you find attraction.
That's how hot this podcast is, by the way. The police are on their way. No, I'm joking.
I know. It's a sign. So I would say that you're not. So I would say actually, I don't think it comes into that space. And actually, if we're going to look at attachment styles, you have to remember, like, if you are extremely avoidant by nature, you have fundamentally you have a fear of intimacy and closeness. So you kind of have to look at it a bit like having an allergic reaction, you know, like if you eat chocolate cake and you like chocolate, but you're allergic to it, it's going to make you sick. And if you are very, very avoidant, that means that once tenderness and intimacy kicks in through no place of your own, you can't help it. No matter what you're thinking, your primitive impulses are going to switch on, your fight, flight, freeze responses, which means you're going to run, shut down, you're going to freak out, you're going to feel immensely distressed, panicked, and you're just going to withdraw and shut that person out. And you can't help it because the very thing that is triggering that is closeness and intimacy, which is obviously horrible for the person on the other side, because it's like there's real feelings here. It's very confusing. It's not like a natural fade out. So my point being is that are intimacy and tenderness triggered when you're talking to someone on an app? No. And so actually that's a space where an avoidant, I would argue, can really express the truest version of themselves, because there's no threat. They feel safe to feel their feelings. So usually probably like their truest, most authentic self is coming out. They're able to be vulnerable. They're able to be who they are because there's no connection yet. And then maybe it goes off the app and you start meeting and dating. It's all going great. This is what we would call love bombing in some places. And then bam, suddenly the feelings start to heighten and that connection starts to happen, and their impulses and their panic alarms go off and they're gone and they shut down. So that would be the avoidant. And of course, the anxious attachment is, like, I guess they're the codependent. So in other words, they've learned a template of love when they're a child, which is that, if your needs aren't met as a child, you learn that, well, if there's something wrong with you, there's something wrong with me. So if you're sad, I'm sad. If there's something wrong with you, I have to fix it. So they go into fix it mentality, because from a primitive point of view, a child can't just leave the family home because you're going to die in the wild. So that's a very sensible thing for the child to do, which is to think, well, it must be me and I have to fix this. And that can express itself in many different ways. You can become like somebody who wants to become hyper successful in an attempt to, well, if I become successful, that will make my parents happy, then they'll love me and meet my needs. But it can play out in relationships. So you get with somebody, and instead of thinking this person's pulling away, they're not meeting my needs, therefore I should remove myself, you go into a subconscious fix it mentality. So you've got avoidant person freaking out, their subconscious thing is telling them to shut down, and your subconscious thing is going, I have to fix this. So I will fix this by two means. I will get louder, which is called protest behaviour.
Yep.
So the baby screams more and more and more and more, and then the parent meets their needs. So you get more and more. Look what you're doing to me. You're hurting me. How can you hurt me? In an attempt to, I guess, have the partner go, I'm so sorry they're there. But of course, that just drives the avoidant person further away. Or very classically, an anxious attached person will go into a fawn response. So people pleasing. I'll give them more space. I'll be a bit kinder. I'll be a bit politer. I'll stuff all of my feelings and all of my needs down because I'm trying to fix this. And it's just a really tragic dynamic, you know. And unfortunately with codependents, they're not attracted to available people. They're fundamentally unavailable themselves because they're likely, if they're going to meet people who are anxious or even secure, are going to get the ick. You know, they're not going to be attracted to them. They've learned a template of love, which is avoidance. So on a primitive level, that feels like chemistry. It feels like sexual attraction. And so they get attracted to the wrong types.
It makes so much sense.
But it's all trauma, and it all goes back to abandonment issues. And when we're 3, you've got to remember, it's not just a case of like, if my parent abandons me, I'm going to feel sad. You are going to die. So your brain will develop a very sophisticated response mechanism to never allow you to feel feelings of rejection and abandonment again, because you have a subconscious belief that you're going to die. So if you are avoidant, that means I'm not even going to let you in and get close to me.
Yep.
Because subconsciously, I believe if I get close to anyone, if I don't depend on anyone but myself, I'm going to die. And the anxious person has developed a subconscious belief. If I walk away and I have to feel these feelings of rejection and abandonment, I'm going to die. So I'm going to stay, even if you're cheating on me, even if you're being violent towards me, even if you're abusing me and treating me terribly, I will stay. And of course, in that space, they go through more abandonment and rejection.
Until they can't take any more and have to walk away. But it takes a lot to get there.
Then that can be the healing of you, because when you learn the power of walking away and you realize I'm safe, I'm not dying, you kind of realize that you're okay. But it's I guess that is what you would call a trauma bond. That's what creates these toxic relationships. And I also think that's where the term narcissist gets really overused in our culture.
I think so too.
Dated a narcissist. It's like, well, no, actually, if you are a very avoidant person, male or female, you exhibit quite narcissistic behaviors, because you can be quite selfish in an attempt to control intimacy, control the level of space. And so you can seem very narcissistic, but it's not narcissistic. Narcissists are very calculated and measured. They're considering their next move. They're intentionally hurting you. Whereas avoidance, whilst they are intentional in their distance and intentional to the point of sometimes being a bit mean to push you away, it's also very subconscious and very unintentional and not done with a lot of like care and thought. So
yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I did a podcast called Navigating Narcissism, and it was so interesting. She was quite a specialist on the topic, and she was saying how we so mislabel people as being narcissists, but there's so many other things at play, like ADHD comes into it, or there's a lot. So yeah, if you're listening to this and you haven't heard that, please go and check that out. I can't remember the episode number, but it's called Navigating Narcissism, and it's on the podcast playlist. And there's another episode that on narcissism as well, which again, you know, I think if someone's got narcissistic personality disorder, it's a very real thing, and it's, you know, it's serious. You need some support. You need some help with that, right? As does the person who's going through it themselves. So yeah, that's important. But I think, you know, what we do as society is that we, again, mislabel people, and we throw these terms around, and it kind of devalues the actual, that, you know, what it actually means. So it is really important that you kind of look at yourself and go, what's triggering me? What is going on here? Am I now projecting this label onto this person? Or I might be the person who has this and I'm projecting it out, etc., etc. But I think if I, reverse back to the online dating side of things, what you're saying, sorry, my headphone keeps popping out. What you're saying is you don't get to see those attachment styles until you've potentially come off the app, or at least had quite a number of interactions on there to build some kind of, connection beforehand.
And of course, the digital era is going to enable the avoidant more. because because ultimately everybody wants love. Like the anxious person wants, so does the avoidant. It's a normal universal desire. It's just that when they get too close, it's overwhelming. And so it means that they can fulfill that desire to have connection, but they can do it in a way that's very distant, very safe. There's a digital wedge in it. I can text you. It's a digital, I don't have to meet you. And then when it's getting too much, I just don't respond to you. I just won't even read your text messages, you know? So this isn't someone you're meeting at your local church group or at work, you know, who you're seeing and they have to interact. So I would argue that it's enabling like people who tend to have more avoidant. And also because you can have sexual connections now digitally as well, because people have smartphones, sexting's a big thing, you know, so you can go on the internet, talk to lots of people, have sexual connections with them without even meeting them in real life. And that, you know, we say porn's addictive. Like, I think that's becoming addictive, probably more for men than women as well, which is just like sexting, you know.
Right. Sexting for potentially older listeners, in the sense, what you're saying there?
Sexting would be like exchanging videos and intimate images with someone.
Right.
After texting for a while. So it's all very digital. And I can see why, like, there would be a thrill to be had in that. You know what I mean? Like, instead of watching porn, you can like talk to people, and then after time you can get pictures out of them.
So there's an interaction element to it.
Yeah, but then it's like, where's the motivation to go and have real sex? And actually, again, meet someone in real life and talk to them. Of course, that's not the case for everyone, but I would just argue, I think, particularly if you sit in the more avoidant camp and you already have commitment issues, it allows you to get connection and sexual intimacy with people, but in a very safe, very digital way. So that side of things I could see becoming addictive and thrilling in its own way, but arguably unfulfilling, again depleting our neurotransmitters and just ultimately desensitizing us from real life connection and sex. So it's not good. It's just another example of the digital era interfering with the natural process of male female mating and courting, you know.
Yeah And the pool is so much bigger, right? So now, as a man, thinking about my own fears and insecurities around online dating, and I'm sure it's the same for a woman, please say if it's not, but it's like, I'm not competing with everyone in this pub now. I'm competing against everyone in a 20-mile radius who have this job or that job or can do this, and now it's like the urgency starts to heighten, because I'm like, no, I really need to stand out. So the performance aspect then starts to play a part in just courting naturally.
And attention. I mean, people don't have an attention span, do they? Like, we're sort of scrolling on our phones. And like you said, yeah, you're texting multiple people. It's not the same as getting a 5-minute conversation in person when it's just the two of you and you have to just focus on each other. You know, I know I'm so negative. I do feel incredibly existential about dating. And I do think, to be more positive, I do think sometimes we have to get through the worst of things to come out on top. And I do think, given that the apps are naturally, like, people seem to be switching them off and moving away from them, I think the future of dating is going to be like Tinder meetups, Bumble meetups, where they actually do ticketed singles events, you know, obviously after regulated and safe, where we actually are meeting people in real life. I know that there are more and more speed dating nights starting to emerge, but real tip here for any guys that are listening, the problem with speed dating nights is that they're overwhelmingly outnumbered by women. So if you're a single guy, it might be worth checking them out. Yeah. I guess, but I personally, I do feel the more and more, I think we're only going to go farther and farther down this digital rabbit hole and realize that it's not working for us. And I think we'll come out with more, hopefully, interesting ideas about how can we actually meet people in real life and, you know, bring it back to basics.
And I think that's where, so I'm a Gen X, so I'm pre-technology and then embracing technology and being intentional around technology. I personally think it was the best generation, but that's obviously, I would say that. But I think the idea there is to go, okay, technology is supposed to serve me, not the other way around. And so there's still that wrestle that goes on with at least my generation, or people who are from that kind of world, not even generation. So I think moving forward, it's knowing that, oh, here's an app and the functionality and the reason for this app is an opportunity to connect with someone and meet them and then go and follow up, but not to stay on the app as its own thing that becomes my new toy or whatever, and the app becomes the focus of everything, not the actual reason for going on the app in the first place, and that is to meet someone. And getting that balance right is really difficult, because I think these things are designed not to do that. These things are designed to make money, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, they're corporations. They don't want you to, like, they're going to lose business at the end of the day. And algorithms, I mean, they are sophisticated, and I'm not sure how they work in apps, but I do know, like, this is kind of crazy. I don't know how to explain it, but like, so remember that intermittent reward that we get from dopamine? So in other words, there was like an experiment done with rats, and they had like cocaine water, like 2 things of cocaine water, but one of them is like, you can just get cocaine water whenever you want it, so you run back and forth and it's there. And then the other one is like intermittent cocaine, so it's like sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's there a lot, then sometimes it's not there at all, just random. And the rats got overwhelmingly more addicted to the one where it was like you didn't know. But they apply that to algorithms as well when you're swiping on like YouTube Shorts or TikTok, which is that they'll put in something that's they know you're really going to like, and then they'll put in like a few ones that you're not going to like, and then one that you do really like, because it's part of that kind of like, I'm bored, oh I like it, I don't like it. It goes into that intermittent.
Makes sense.
And it's powerful, man. It gets you hooked, and we all know this. We all know how you can just lose an hour going, I've just watched mindless garbage. What have I done? And I wouldn't be surprised if they're doing that with apps, where they kind of figure out who you're more likely to swipe on and who you're not more likely to swipe on, and kind of play it that way, where you're getting this internet.
Yeah, I saw something.
So
I saw something.
Smart. What is going on with the world, man?
It's like we're up against the machine, all the time. But I saw this thing that plays into that, and it was, you are given so many likes in a day, so you like all the people, and then as soon as you're out of likes, it starts showing you the people that it actually thinks you would like actually like, oh yeah, you two would match. But you can't like them anymore unless you subscribe to the premium package. So again, it is trying to, pull out of you every last bit of money that you have, because it's playing on your fears and your insecurity and your desire to get that dopamine hit again.
It's terrible. They're designed to keep. I mean, obviously, apps are designed, like you said. That is, if you look at it, the blueprint of it is a flaw. It's a business, which means how on earth can a business that wants money makes money by getting people to partner up? How can they're going to? The intention will be to keep people single because the apps are busy. I mean, I know it's like sort of like, it's a very kind of like flawed way of, a negative way of looking at dating, but it, corporate power and money of course comes into it.
I believe, now this is a very wider point outside of dating, I believe that society is slowly collapsing on all these weird values and things that we've put out there, and going to go back to a more tried and tested way of living, I think. And I think that will then also have an impact on the way that we relate and date people as well.
I hope so. Sometimes things have to get worse to get better. It's sort of the law of the universe and history of everything. And there's a lot, and to be fair, I'm so negative about it, but for me, my journey of online dating I have learned so much about myself in terms of my femininity and my own feminine sexuality. And what it's forced me to get really honest about what I want out of connection and all that kind of stuff. And also in the process, I've learned so much about masculinity and men, and it just makes me love men all the more that I learn about masculinity. It's just, unfortunately, I think we're in a culture that's bringing out the dark side of masculinity and the dark side of femininity, and I don't like those sides.
Yeah.
But it has been a bit of an awakening for me. So there's good stuff there.
Okay, so to end on a positive, right?
Yeah.
Let's controversially, Rebecca, you are going to represent all women, right? And I'm going to represent all men right now. Wow, what an honor, right? What is it that Rebecca stroke all women, if you really break it down, what are you looking for in the opposite sex? What is it that you're looking for in a man?
I think women love to be admired. So we love to be looked at and to feel beautiful. I think Instagram speaks for itself. It's an ocean of posing and pouting. yes, men are validating that, but I think women love it, you know? So I think women love to be admired. We love to feel beautiful and complimented, sexual and attractive. I think that's part of our own sensuality and our own sexuality. It's what gets us into the bedroom, is feeling really beautiful. I think being heard, being listened to. And I just think communication, I really do. And communication, of course, is about the ability to talk, but it's also about the ability to listen. And once after what happens in the bedroom, a process of following through on your word, you know, like meeting someone again, continuing to communicate with them. And in the cases where you are not interested in someone after you've slept with them, going back to an old-fashioned agenda where we actually sit down and we say face to face, I think you're wonderful, I've had a great time with you, but if I'm being completely honest with you, the connection's not right for me. And kind of hopefully moving away from the era of like ghosting happening after you've had sex with someone.
So having the courage to step up and just take ownership about the reality of how you feel.
I'm going on on another side note, but like I did speak to a guy who was bisexual, and he did say that he thinks women are a lot better when it comes to after dates. I'm not talking about, so I think women do a lot more of the ghosting in the initial dating app stage, but I'm talking about once you've actually met someone, once you've slept with someone. He said women are a lot better than men, he finds, at communicating. I'm not interested, this connection isn't working, the men are. And so I think like, yeah, I mean, I just think ghosting after sex is such bad behavior. And I think it's too easy to disappear in our culture. And I think it would be nice if we lived in a culture where we recognize that that's actually it's quite an abusive thing to do to someone, to just starve them of answers and information and vanish on them. And if we kind of condemned that more universally, then hopefully there would be more of an unwritten code of like, yes, once a connection is going its natural way, the person who wants to walk away from it needs to kind of somewhat communicate that in a respectful way that doesn't involve disappearing.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. So if you're listening and you're a man, like, bear that in mind. If that's something that you've done before to someone, or you find yourself wanting to do that, just try and think what it's like for the woman on the other side of that, and get the courage to take some accountability and have a difficult conversation if you have to, you know.
And women like to feel beautiful and admired. So
I was going to say, and then, you know,
always compliment a woman.
There's this
people hate me, I feel so stereotyped, but I also just can't. I feel like it's just so fundamentally true. Like, I'm yet to meet a woman that doesn't love to feel beautiful and admired, and it plumps you up, it gets you going, you know. It's
it's again going back to theology. There is some wisdom written about cherish your woman, like love her in that way, because it will bring the best out of her. And then for men, if I speak for my gender, I think for us the biggest thing, and I've spoken to a lot of men about this. Yes, food and sex is the one that everyone goes to. Oh yeah, he needs to be fed, and he needs to. Yes, of course, yeah, like on a physical level. But actually, it's having a cheerleader. It's having that woman who's going to stand by you, support you, and not be overcritical about what you're doing, but actually support you and trust you and go, you know what, babe, I think you're going to work this out. I'm not sure how. I don't have the answers, but I'm gonna come with you for the ride. And I think that at its very primitive point is the bit that goes, yeah, man, this could be the one, you know, because you want to build a kingdom, all men do, and you want a queen by your side. Like, we can pretend we want, you know, the mistress, this, and the other, but at the end of the day, we want the queen to stand beside us and look out onto the horizon and go, we got this.
Stand by your man.
There you go. Yeah.
Or as Amy Winehouse, I love Amy Winehouse in one of her songs. She says, if my man was fighting some unholy war, I would be beside him, drunk with pride. And I'm like,
love
yeah,
that.
I get that.
It's true. There's such an element of respect in that. It's huge. Yeah. And I think, you know, it's why, you know, we won't break into it now, but it's why men, again, in a healthy environment, but it's why boys and mums are so well connected, because your mum is your biggest cheerleader. She's the one who stands by you all the way through, and you look for that in a mate, you know, amongst other things, but you look for that in a mate as well. So yeah, we're putting right the world here, both of us, on this Go Encourage podcast.
Or we're going to push a few buttons in the process.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm open to it. Like, if people disagree, do put something in the comments. Like, Rebecca will have a look, I'll look as well, and we're happy to have an open dialogue about it. You know, obviously keep it productive because, you know, we want to move forward. So yeah, always open to that. And I do get a lot of DMs in Instagram, seems to be my biggest platform, where people are like, look, I didn't want to put this in the comments because but this is what I think. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, let's have a dialogue and have a conversation. A couple of times it's led to a phone call as well. So I'm not
That's
promising that for
amazing.
everyone, but it's a good thing, you know. Yeah, well, it's been a pleasure having you back again. Will you come back for a third time? Can we make that happen? Fantastic. So we'll do that. This episode will probably air in 2025. So let's see if we can squeeze another one in 2025 as well. That'd be really, really cool. Thank you for agreeing to come on.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Where can people connect with you online?
You can get me on Instagram and TikTok at RebeccaJacksonHypnosis.com. I've also got a YouTube channel as well. It's in the early stages, but if you want to check it out, I've got a couple of videos up there as well.
Excellent. All right. Great. And I'll put links in the description. For those of you who don't want to type that out, there'll be a link. You can go and do that. And I have to say, your reels, your content is really informative. It's how we met, which is great. And I think the way that you're able to communicate things in such a short space, because we're all challenged, right, as content creators, to get that information out there. I think you do a really good job. So keep doing what you're doing. It takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there like that.
Thank you.
And I'm really grateful to call you friend.
And you, and thank you for, you know, like creating a platform where we talk, we learn, knowledge is power, and it unites us and brings us together. So thank you as well.
Or at the very least, sparks conversation, right? All right. Thanks for coming on. If you're listening, I just want to say, I hope you really enjoyed that episode. Do reach out to Rebecca if you have any follow-up questions. You can do that the same with me as well. I'd love to see you back for the next one. Whatever you're doing, whatever you're facing in relationships or in the wider context, keep moving forward and go encourage. Hey, really hope you enjoyed that episode, and I hope there was something there that you can take away and reflect on. If you'd like to continue the conversation, you can do so publicly on YouTube via the comments, or if you prefer to be more private, you can DM me on Instagram, and the handle is @GoEncourage. You can also find links to everything at the website, which is www.goencourage.com. You can find a copy of the Courage Journal, links to TikTok, Instagram, and all the places that you can find Go Encourage online. You can also have a look at the upcoming Go Encourage blog, which is coming soon. So yeah, definitely do check that out. But my encouragement to you is, whatever you're doing, whatever you're going through, keep moving forward and to go encourage. I'll see you on the next episode.